The day began like any other on Earth. The sun rose over the cities. The streets bustled with people as they went about their business. The hum of machines and the soft murmur of technology filled the air. It was a world that had become accustomed to noise, a world that had come to depend on its constant flow of information, communication, and connection. But then, without warning, it all stopped. The hum of electricity, the buzz of satellites, the flicker of screens all vanished in an instant. Alex Carter stood at his station in a government facility, a place designed to monitor the flow of data from all corners of the globe. When the silence first hit, it was subtle enough that Alex didn't immediately realize what had happened. He checked his monitors, expecting to see the usual readouts of satellite feeds and network activity. But there was nothing, no data, no signals, no transmissions. The lights flickered for a moment and then went out. He thought it was a glitch at first, maybe a temporary outage, but when he tried to call his team, he found that his phone wouldn't work. No internet, no cell service, not even the internal government network was operational. Panic began to rise as the reality of the situation set in. Alex tried to remain calm as he walked down the hall to the control center, but he could already hear the faint murmurs of concern from the other staff members. Something was wrong. The control center was in chaos when Alex arrived. Screens that should have been filled with data were nothing but static. Some were completely black, others flickered erratically. A few operators were frantically typing at their consoles, but nothing was responding. The commander in charge was barking orders, trying to get anything to work, but the silence was all that answered. Alex took a deep breath and stepped forward, offering suggestions to the others. He suggested they check the power grids, the satellite feeds. Maybe they could restore communication to one sector of the globe. At least they needed to know if this was happening everywhere. But as they scrambled to troubleshoot, it became clear that the silence wasn't just isolated to their facility. It was global. Alex called up a global communications map he had access to as part of his job, and watched in disbelief as every signal vanished. Every major city, every government agency, every military base went dark. Nothing could be transmitted in or out of Earth. No signals, no transmissions, not even the military's emergency channels were active. Then, just as quickly as the panic started, the monitors flickered back on. A single message filled the screen, a message that was impossible to ignore, impossible to understand. The Empire has fallen. Alex froze at the words. His mind raced as he tried to process the meaning. What did it mean? Who was the Empire, and why had it fallen? The message was too brief, too cryptic to provide any answers, yet it felt like it was the key to everything. He stared at the words for a long moment, but before he could make sense of it, the lights in the building flickered once more, then went out completely. Alex stood in the dark, the weight of the silence pressing down on him. Alex paced through the darkened hallways of the facility, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened outside the control center. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, the air heavy with the lingering questions of his team and himself. What did the message mean, and why had everything gone silent so suddenly? His first instinct was to reach out to his superiors, but as he made his way to the communications room, he saw that the phone lines were still down, the computers unresponsive. Nothing was working. It was as if the entire planet had been cut off from itself all at once. Alex's team had gathered in the makeshift command center, a room that had once been filled with the constant clatter of keyboards and the murmur of voices. Now sat in an eerie stillness. They sat around a table discussing what they knew and what they didn't, but the answers remained elusive. "Have we heard anything from the outside?" one of his colleagues asked a young analyst named Sarah, her face pale and drawn as she stared at the black screen in front of her. "Nothing," Alex replied, shaking his head. "Everything's dead." He motioned to the satellite feeds on the screen in front of him. "Even the military systems are offline. It's like we've been cut off from the rest of the world." "Maybe it's a system failure," Sarah suggested, but her voice lacked the conviction it once had. "Maybe it'll all come back online after a while." Alex didn't believe that for a second. He had worked in these systems long enough to know that when something went this wrong, it wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't something that would fix itself in a few hours. "We need to find out if this is happening everywhere, or if it's just us," Alex said, standing up. "Start calling the other facilities. We can't sit here in the dark." As they worked to make contact with other locations, the unease in the room grew with each failed attempt at communication. It wasn't just the facility that was dark. It wasn't just the military, it was the entire planet. The silence stretched on with no explanation, and no way to break it. The hours passed, but it felt like days in the stillness of the building. Alex's thoughts spiraled, his mind struggling to piece together what little information he had. The Empire, the message, the sudden silence, it didn't add up. The Empire had been a constant presence for centuries. Its influence had been a shadow over Earth since humanity's earliest days. The power that had held the world in its grip had always seemed unshakable, invincible. Even the idea that it could simply fall apart overnight was inconceivable. Alex stared at the screen again, the same message still glowing softly in the dark. The Empire has fallen. What had happened to cause such a sudden collapse? What force had the power to bring down a civilization that spanned across the stars and controlled Earth with an iron fist? A cold shiver ran down his spine as a thought struck him. What if Earth wasn't the only one affected? What if the Empire wasn't the only thing that had vanished? What if the whole system had collapsed? He quickly pulled up the encrypted data logs from earlier, the ones they had been trying to decode, but before he could dive deeper into them, there was a knock at the door. It was Sarah, her face flushed with urgency. "Alex, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with fear. Without a word, Alex followed her to the control room, where she handed him a tablet with a new message on the screen. This time, it wasn't just the Empire that was gone. It was something much worse. A new message blinked at him in stark letters. The Empire was not alone. Alex stared at the message on the screen, his mind racing. The words felt heavy with unspoken meaning. The Empire was not alone. It was a simple phrase, but it carried an undeniable weight, as if it was a warning, a reminder that the silence that had fallen upon Earth was just the beginning. He glanced at Sarah, who stood beside him, her eyes wide with fear, but also curiosity. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Alex replied, shaking his head. "But we need to find out what happened. We need to know who, if anyone, is still out there." The group had been huddling in the control room for hours now. The silence outside was oppressive. Each failed attempt at communication with the outside world only deepened the sense of isolation that was creeping into their bones. But the message had changed everything. It was a clue, a small but crucial piece of a much larger puzzle. They worked in silence for a while longer, trying to decrypt the logs. Sarah focused on the data streams, while Alex scoured every available archive for information, but nothing seemed to answer the question of what had happened to the Empire or what the new message meant. Then, just as they were about to give up and consider their next move, the sensors in the control room began to beep in low, irregular patterns. It wasn't a full signal, just a faint trace of something, a movement in the sky. Something was out there, something that hadn't been there before. "Is that?" Sarah began, but her words were cut off as the beep grew louder, more insistent. Alex moved quickly to the console, his fingers flying over the keys. "I think we have a signal," he muttered. "We're picking up something in orbit. It's not one of our ships, not one of the Empire's." He turned to the others. "We need to get outside now." Within moments, they had gathered what little gear they could and made their way to the rooftop of the facility. The air still and unnervingly quiet around them. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he looked up at the sky. He'd never seen it so empty before. In the distance, something was moving. It wasn't a ship from the Empire, not even close. It was smaller but far more intricate. Its shape, unlike anything they had ever seen before, it didn't resemble the cold industrial ships that had once orbited Earth as part of the Empire's fleet. It was alive, almost as if it had grown in the void of space itself. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. "What the hell is that?" Before anyone could respond, the object began to descend, its movements smooth and deliberate. As it grew closer, they saw that it wasn't just a ship but a living being, alive in a way that defied everything they had known about spacefaring civilizations. It was organic yet mechanical, its surface shifting and changing, as if it was adapting to its surroundings. The ship touched down with an almost imperceptible thud, just a few hundred yards away from the facility. The ground trembled slightly as it settled on the barren Earth. Its surface gleamed faintly in the dim light, and then the hatch opened. Out of the ship emerged beings that were nothing like the Empire's soldiers. They were taller and thinner, their forms almost translucent, as if they were made of light and shadow. They moved with a grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics, and as they stepped onto the earth their eyes glowed softly in eerie and alien light. Alex felt a chill run down his spine as the beings approached. He didn't know whether to run or stay, but something in their gaze held him rooted to the spot. The air seemed to hum around them, a strange energy filling the space between them. One of the beings stepped forward, its voice echoed in Alex's mind. Not spoken but felt. "We are not here to harm you," it said, its tone calm yet carrying a weight of authority. "We come with a message for you." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. The being continued, "The Empire is gone, but there are others who remain who will not rest until Earth falls under their control again. You must be ready." The words hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Alex realized then that the disappearance of the Empire was only the beginning of something much larger, something far more dangerous. Alex stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The beings from the strange ship were not hostile, but their presence was unsettling in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. They didn't move like any humans he'd ever seen, their long limbs flowing gracefully, their glowing eyes observing the group with an intensity that felt almost knowing. The leader of the beings, a tall figure whose translucent skin shimmered under the dim light of Earth's fading sun, took another step forward, their voice filling Alex's mind once more. "Your history is not what you have been told. The Empire's rule was a veil, and beneath it, you are more than slaves. You are the inheritors of a power that predates all of us." Alex's breath hitched. He couldn't speak, but his mind raced. Inheritors of power. What power? The being's eyes softened, almost as if it could sense his confusion. "We will show you. You must understand before it's too late." With a wave of its hand, the air around them seemed to ripple. The world itself felt like it was bending, and Alex felt a strange pressure in his chest. Suddenly, before his eyes, the surroundings began to shift, the rooftop of the facility fading away, replaced by the image of an ancient, lush landscape. Towering trees rose against a deep blue sky, their leaves shimmering with iridescent colors. Massive structures, nothing like the cold, metallic spires of the Empire, dotted the land. Organic, flowing buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself. Long ago, the beam's voice echoed, Earth was not part of the Empire. Earth was once a center of knowledge and power, a world unlike any other. The image shifted, showing scenes of early humans, their faces filled with awe and wonder as they discovered technologies far beyond what the Empire had ever shared with them. These weren't the simple beginnings of humankind that Alex had been taught in history books. This was something extraordinary. These humans were masters of energy, of creation, of the very forces of nature itself. Alex watched, captivated, as the images showed a time when humanity had been in control of technology that transcended the empires. They had not been conquerors, but creators, innovators whose understanding of the universe was unmatched. But then, a shadow passed over the world. The Empire arrived, and with it, the darkness of control. The images shifted again, showing the first interactions between the ancient humans and the Empire. The Empire's fleet descended from the sky, vast and terrifying. Its presence was an overwhelming force, and what followed was a history Alex never knew, a history of subjugation, manipulation, and the erasure of everything that had come before. "They took your past," the being said softly, and twisted it to their own will. "You were told you were primitive, weak, and incapable of greatness. But that was a lie. The Empire sought to suppress what you could become. And in doing so, they crippled your potential." Alex's mind reeled. Everything he had been taught about Earth's place in the galaxy, about humanity's place as subjects to the Empire, was suddenly shattered. The truth, the real history of humankind, was far grander than he could have ever imagined. But why had the Empire fallen? Why had these beings chosen now to reveal this to him? You were never meant to be their subjects, the being continued. The Empire's grip on Earth has weakened, but it will try to return. There are factions within the Empire, those who were content with control, and those who now see Earth as a prize to be taken once more. Alex's pulse quickened. And you? Why are you here? The being's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. We are the Keepers, guardians of the knowledge the Empire erased. We have watched over Earth for millennia, waiting for the day when the truth would be revealed. That day is now. You are the key, Alex Carter. You, and those like you, are the last hope for Earth. Alex felt a heavy weight settle over him. He had always thought of Earth as small, insignificant, at the mercy of greater powers. But now, in the presence of these beings, he understood just how wrong he had been. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice hoarse, barely able to wrap his mind around the enormity of the task ahead. The Keeper's gaze softened. You must awaken the potential within humanity, Alex. You must lead them to reclaim what was taken, to rebuild what was lost. The Empire is broken, but others will come, and Earth must be ready. With that, the image of the ancient Earth began to fade, the sky dimming as the world returned to its present form. The beings, too, began to retreat back into their ship, their glowing eyes one last reminder of the incredible truth they had shared. Alex stood alone now, his mind buzzing with questions, with possibilities. The silence that had gripped Earth was not the end. It was just the beginning. The strange beings had left as quickly as they had arrived, vanishing into their organic ship with a soft hum, leaving only the weight of their words in the air. The stillness of the night felt oppressive, the silence around them almost unnatural now. For Alex, it was as if the entire world had shifted beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the universe had been turned upside down. The Empire wasn't invincible. Earth wasn't a helpless pawn. But now, more than ever, he felt the weight of responsibility. The Keepers had spoken of Earth's potential, of humanity's forgotten power, but they had also made it clear that the Empire's fragments weren't the only threat. New forces, driven by the desire to control Earth, were waiting for the right moment to strike. We need to act, Alex muttered, his voice hoarse. The silence. It was just the beginning. Sarah, who had been standing quietly by his side, nodded slowly. You've seen it too, haven't you? Earth, humankind. It's not what we thought. We're more than we've been led to believe. Exactly, Alex replied. And if we don't do something, we're going to be in serious trouble. We have to prepare. With the vision of humanity's forgotten past still fresh in his mind, Alex felt a renewed sense of urgency. He turned to his team, all of them now gathered in the dimly lit control room. We need to form a resistance. We need to reconnect with the scattered groups of humanity still out there. People who aren't just surviving but fighting for something greater. We've got to rally them. Where do we even start? Asked Mark, one of the senior technicians, his brow furrowed in confusion. How do we find these groups? The entire infrastructure is offline, no communication, no military control. Alex paused, looking around at the faces of the team. Each one held a spark of determination in their eyes, a quiet strength that had been tested by the silence. We don't need the infrastructure. We have something far more powerful than communication grids or satellites. We have knowledge, and we have each other. And most importantly, we know how to think for ourselves. A small murmur of agreement rippled through the group. We'll use the old networks, Alex continued, the ones that the Empire never fully eradicated. There are hidden channels across the planet, ancient systems that were left untouched, abandoned by the Empire when they assumed they'd completely conquered Earth. These are secure lines we can use to find and contact others. But what about the Empire's factions? Sarah asked, her voice low with concern. They're fractured, but they're still dangerous, right? Alex's jaw tightened. They're not the only threat anymore. We've seen what the Keepers can do, but there are others, more powerful forces who would want nothing more than to make sure Earth remains under someone's thumb. We don't know who exactly, but we can't assume that this will be easy. The Empire's fall was just the first blow. As the group brainstormed, plans began to form, tentative at first, but gaining strength with each new suggestion. The resistance would be small at first, just a handful of humans working in secret, moving through old underground systems, trying to rally as many as they could without alerting those who might seek to stop them. They would have to work fast, before the remnants of the Empire, or worse, something more dangerous, could get a foothold again. We'll need weapons, supplies, and most importantly, we'll need knowledge, Alex said firmly, the leader in him emerging with each passing moment. I don't know what's out there, but I know humanity has the ingenuity to stand up to anything. We've just forgotten that we can. Sarah gave him a determined nod. And we'll help you. We're all in this together. The team dispersed, each member taking on their assigned roles. As they worked, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of resolve settling over him. The task ahead was daunting. There were so many unknowns, so many threats lurking in the shadows. But they weren't alone, not anymore. Humanity wasn't weak. It had been beaten down, yes, but it had also survived, had thrived, had learned to adapt in ways the Empire never could have predicted. He stood at the control room's window, staring out at the vast, silent city beyond. "We will be ready," he said softly, to no one in particular. Humanity will rise again. Days blurred into each other as the team worked tirelessly, the weight of their new mission pressing down on them. Every available moment was spent piecing together a plan, navigating the maze of old networks, and reaching out to other survivors. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away, that somewhere in the silence there was a force moving, watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. The facility had become their new headquarters, a place of activity in the middle of a still world. The external comm systems were still down, but the team had started using alternative methods of communication, old encrypted channels, forgotten lines that no one in the Empire had bothered to wipe out. These were their only link to the outside world now. Sarah, Mark, and the others were all busy at their respective stations, trying to locate any surviving factions or networks. Alex stood at the center of the control room, staring at the constantly updating map of Earth's regions. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been lost. They had to find allies, form a coalition strong enough to stand against whatever forces might try to reclaim Earth. Suddenly, the hum of the monitors paused, and the screen blinked with an alert. Sarah's voice cut through the quiet. "Alex, you need to see this." He moved quickly to her station, his pulse quickening. On the screen was a live feed, static at first, but then a clearer image began to emerge. A figure appeared in the feed, but not one he recognized. The transmission was poor, but it was unmistakable. Someone was trying to contact them. A human. "Is this real?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we trace it?" Sarah didn't hesitate, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's coming from a remote area, about 200 miles from here. This signal's old, maybe decades old, but it's still active. Whoever this is, they've been out there for a while." Mark joined them, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the feed. "This could be a trap," he said, his voice tense. "We don't know who's sending it or why. It could be an Imperial remnant, or worse, something else trying to bait us." Alex exhaled slowly. He had to make a decision. The Keepers had warned them that there were forces, both known and unknown, that would seek to control Earth again. But this was the first real lead they had on possible allies. If it was a trap, they'd be walking into danger, but if it wasn't. He turned to Sarah. "Can we send a reply?" She nodded. "It'll take a few minutes to transmit a secure response, but we can do it. We have to be careful, though. If we send anything out, we risk revealing our location." Alex looked at the map on the screen. Their base was hidden, but not completely off the grid. A transmission could be traced. They had to move fast, and they couldn't afford to be careless. "Do it," he said. "We need to know who this is. We need to know if there's someone we can trust." Sarah hesitated but began typing quickly, sending a short, encrypted message back to the mysterious figure. "Who are you? What do you want?" Moments later, the screen flickered, and the reply came through. The message was short, concise, but its meaning was clear. "We are survivors. The Empire is not gone. They are waiting. Earth is not safe." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The response was chilling. It confirmed what they had feared, that the Empire hadn't truly fallen. Whatever had brought down the vast network of control was temporary. There were remnants, small factions that had splintered but were far from defeated. They were waiting for their chance to rise again, to reclaim what had been lost. As Alex absorbed the message, a cold realization settled over him. Their fight wasn't just against an empire that had crumbled. It was against something much more insidious. Earth had become a battlefield, but not just between humans and the remnants of their former rulers. There were other players, forces from beyond the known, and they had their eyes on the planet. "Damn," Mark muttered. "So we're not alone, and not in the way we thought." Alex nodded grimly. "No, we're not, and that means we need to act faster than we ever thought. They'll be coming for us, and we won't have time to prepare if we don't move now." Just as he spoke, the transmission cut out again, leaving nothing but static. They had lost contact. The silence that followed felt deafening. Alex turned to Sarah. "Get a team ready. We're going to that location." "We don't know who it is," Sarah replied, her voice tight with concern. "It could be a trap." "I know," Alex said, determination hardening his voice. "But we don't have a choice. We can't wait. Not anymore." The team quickly gathered their gear, the urgency of the situation propelling them into motion. Alex's heart raced as he looked around the facility. This had been their home for days, a place of quiet preparation in the midst of a world thrown into chaos. But now, everything had changed. The message from the unknown survivor had confirmed his worst fears. The Empire wasn't as gone as they'd hoped. There were still factions out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Ready?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. Sarah nodded, adjusting the strap of her gear. "As ready as we'll ever be. But this is a risk, Alex. If this turns out to be a trap, we'll be walking straight into a world of trouble." "I know," he replied, "but we have no choice. We can't let fear stop us from acting. This could be our only chance to find out who's still out there, and whether we have any hope of getting them on our side." The team filed out of the control room and into the transport vehicle waiting outside. The sky overhead was dark, the world silent except for the soft hum of the engine and the low murmur of the team's voices as they prepared for the journey ahead. The location they were heading toward was remote, isolated, far from any major cities or military installations. It was the perfect place for someone to hide, or to set a trap. The ride was tense, the silence pressing in on them. Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. He had been trained to think like this, to prepare for every eventuality. But this situation was different. There was no playbook for what they were about to face. Everything was uncertain. Everything was a gamble. After what felt like hours, the vehicle slowed to a stop. Alex's eyes scanned the desolate landscape as they parked near a rocky outcrop, their destination finally in sight. It was a small, nondescript building, barely visible against the landscape, the kind of structure that could easily be overlooked by anyone not looking closely. Alex stepped out first, his boots crunching against the gravel as he surveyed the area. The air felt thick, as though something was wrong, though he couldn't put his finger on it. The building before them was surrounded by a dense, quiet forest. No movement, no signs of life. "Stay sharp," He murmured to the team, his hand resting on the sidearm at his hip. "We don't know what we're walking into." They approached cautiously, checking their surroundings with every step. Alex's mind was racing, the unknown playing tricks on him. Every creak of the ground beneath them, every flicker of shadow in the distance, set his nerves on edge. They reached the building's entrance, a heavy metal door that looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. A strange symbol was etched into the metal, one that Alex didn't recognize. It was intricate, almost like an alien script, though its meaning eluded him. "Do we knock?" Mark asked, attempting to lighten the mood with a dry smile, though his voice was tight with tension. Alex gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We don't knock. We don't have time for games." With a steady push, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway beyond. The air inside was stale, carrying the scent of dust and decay. There was no sign of life, no warmth in the atmosphere. Everything was cold, too cold, as though the place had been abandoned long ago. They moved inside slowly, every sense heightened as they stepped through the narrow corridor. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of view. They didn't look like anything Alex had ever seen before, alien, perhaps, or ancient. The thought only deepened the unease that was growing in the pit of his stomach. At the end of the hallway, they reached a large open room, its walls covered in more of the same symbols. In the center of the room, a single figure stood, clad in dark clothing, their back to them. It was hard to tell if the person was human or something else entirely, but they radiated an aura of authority, of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Alex Carter," the figure said, their voice smooth and commanding, though it carried a strange accent. "I've been expecting you." Alex's breath caught in his chest. How did they know his name? Who was this person? "You're the one who sent the message," Alex said, stepping forward cautiously. "Who are you?" The figure turned slowly, revealing their face. It was pale, almost too pale, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to bore into Alex's soul. "I am neither friend nor foe," the figure replied, "but I am someone who knows what is coming. And I am here to warn you, Alex. The Empire's true enemy is far more dangerous than you realize. The time to fight is now, before it's too late." The words hung heavy in the air, thick with the weight of a warning that Alex wasn't ready to hear. Alex stood frozen, the figure's words echoing in his mind. The warning was clear. There was something worse out there, something far more dangerous than the fractured remnants of the Empire. But who were these people, and how did they know so much? The room felt colder now, the shadows stretching around them like they were alive. The figure's dark eyes never left Alex's, and the silence between them seemed to stretch out, thick and oppressive. The tension was almost suffocating, but Alex refused to back down. His team was waiting behind him, ready for whatever came next, but Alex knew they couldn't afford to act without understanding what they were facing. "What do you mean, the true enemy?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Who are you, and why should we trust you?" The figure's lips curled into something that could have been a smile, but it was devoid of warmth. "Trust is a commodity in short supply these days, Alex. I'm not here to make promises. I'm here to deliver a warning. The Empire's grip on Earth may have fractured, but that was only the beginning. What you face now is something older, something much older than the Empire itself." Alex felt a chill creep down his spine. "Older than the Empire? What are you talking about?" The figure stepped closer, and Alex instinctively tightened his grip on his weapon. But there was no aggression in the figure's movements, only a quiet urgency. The Empire didn't come to Earth by accident. They were looking for something. Something buried deep beneath the surface, something they couldn't control. They knew they weren't alone in the universe, but they never understood the full extent of what was out there. "I do." The figure paused, looking over Alex's shoulder as if scanning the team behind him. "You think the Empire is the worst threat you'll face. You haven't even begun to scratch the surface. The Empire was just one of many factions in a much larger game. A game where Earth is nothing more than a prize. A battleground for ancient forces that have been watching you for millennia. Ancient forces. Sarah spoke up from behind Alex, her voice sharp. What are you trying to say? That there are alien forces that are going to invade Earth. The figure nodded slowly. Not invade, not in the way you think. The danger is much more subtle. These forces have been manipulating your history, your evolution, even your very perceptions of reality. They've been watching, guiding you, and when the time is right, they will reveal themselves. Alex felt a sense of unease growing within him. The weight of this information was staggering. Why are you telling us this? What do you want from us? I don't want anything from you, the figure replied. But I need you to understand that you are running out of time. Earth is a target. You may think you've won by surviving the Empire's fall, but there are far worse things waiting in the dark. I'm here to offer you a choice. A choice? Alex asked, brow furrowed. What kind of choice? The figure stepped back, gesturing to the shadows that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. You can keep fighting the remnants of the Empire, and perhaps you will survive. But that will only delay the inevitable. Or, they paused, letting the weight of the words settle in. You can fight the true enemy, the one who has been pulling the strings all along. You can prepare for the war that is coming, not just against the remnants of the Empire, but against a force that will stop at nothing to claim Earth as its own. Alex's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. The Empire's sudden disappearance, the strange message from the Keepers, the threat now standing before him. All of it pointed to something larger, something far more complex than he could have imagined. You want us to fight them, don't you? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. But how? We have no idea what we're up against. The figure's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, Alex thought he saw something ancient in them. That's where you come in, Alex. You are not just a survivor. You are the key. You and your people have the potential to unlock something. Something the Empire never understood. Something that could tip the balance of power. But you must be ready to embrace it, to harness it. Alex didn't know whether to feel hopeful or terrified. What is this? Power. What do we have to do? The figure's voice softened, almost sorrowful. You must find the ancient knowledge that has been hidden for centuries, buried beneath the very ground you walk on. The Empire didn't destroy it. They'd buried it. And if you fail to uncover it, the true enemy will make sure Earth's story ends here, forever. A cold shiver ran down Alex's spine. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he'd ever imagined. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very future of Earth. And the worst part, he didn't know if they were ready. The figure turned to leave, but before disappearing into the shadows, they spoke one final time. Choose wisely, Alex Carter. The war has already begun.